All right, guys. So here I am. Hopefully, you guys can hear me. I'll move this stuff down here. Sorry. Okay. Please bear with me. Okay, just a second, guys. Well, this is bizarre. I don't know how to. I guess I'll just hide that. Okay. All right. So here is Krita. So I'm working in Krita. This is from a drawing I was doing with my class earlier. Uh, they're making a 3D sculpt, and it was based on I was just showing them when we make a 3D sculpt, we want to have a front view, side view of our character at the very minimum to work with. And I can show you guys if you guys want to see kind of where it landed. So this is like kind of part way through that process, but you can see we bring in our side view and our front view side views, and we can kind of like sculpt to that, right? So that's kind of what that looked like. Um, Yeah. So anyways, I did the character design in Krita, but everything that we have been talking about now is to be reflected in this design, right? So I'm still thinking about straights and curves, right? So curve, but I'm kind of adding in this next dimension of form. So I'm thinking curved form, sharp form, flat, round, those kinds of things. So other ways of applying contrast to form, right? Which is kind of like an extension of what we would do with 2D shapes. But just looking at the silhouette, kind of thinking the same thing, right? Curve, straight, straight, right? Curve, um, curve, kind of a S curve here slash C curve, that kind of thing. And the idea is I want to go through and just make sure that I have as many of these things happening simultaneously as I can. My goal was to get a nice straight line here on the back and then have two curves through the front, which you can see reflected there. Um, and you can see I've added some extra detail, so I've deviated a little bit from that simpler curve. But these kinds of things are totally acceptable. It's just adding that extra detail. But if I look at it, the big first read is still that big, simple kind of C curve shape. Right? So we can absolutely have like smaller variations and things like that. But yeah, okay. All right, guys. So that is kind of just a sneak peek of kind of what's coming in a couple of years for you guys. Anyways, so let's go for a brand new document here. Actually, you know what? Since we have it, let's use this same character. Um, Paste it in here. So you guys will by now have a character, and we are soon going to be doing some anatomy work with those characters. You guys will have already gotten some references. So I'm going to show an exercise with you guys that we can use to help us pose out a character quickly, efficiently, while simultaneously really leveling up our drawing abilities. Okay, this is one of the best exercises that I've kind of come across, um, and I strongly, strongly recommend it. So, okay, just want to make sure. Can everyone hear me properly? All right, perfect. Okay, guys, so let us move forward. So we have our design. So what we want to do, we want to break our character down into its most simple shapes and forms. So we want to have a what's called a short form way of drawing a character. So we can have a complex character or a simple character. We want to break it down into very simple elements. So generally speaking, we want to have like, some kind of a body shape, some kind of head shape. My character shapes are very simple. The head is kind of like just like that. The body is kind of just like that. Maybe even simpler than that. Maybe just like that for the body. Legs, kind of like this shape. Foreleg is just something like that. Upper arm, we can start with a round ball here for the shoulders. Let's put this layer above, right? And then kind of just have a couple of tubes for the arms there. Last week we really got into like the rhythm and the flow of the pose and how to kind of simplify those kinds of things, right? Kind of look for these rhythmic patterns in our characters and in the designs. Um, the big kind of high level silhouette type stuff that we want to make sure is reflected, or just at least that we're aware of, and how that is influenced by like principles of design, and or how that actually works uh, in concert with the principles of design to make our just a regular person look somewhat visually interesting, right? The kind of the design, and it could be, it could just be that we find uh, people interesting, and we just want to see people over and over and over again. And so anything that reminds us of people, whether uh, um, abstractly or otherwise, we are like naturally drawn to that. It could be that, right? So so the fact that we like these kind of opposing curves, for example, or straight lines opposing a curved line, for example, or having offset curves, right? Or having forms that taper. It could just be that, what, this is kind of like what we see a lot in the human body. And because of that, we like seeing the same kind of visual kind of language in a design. Whether it's kind of emphasized and stylized, or whether it's very kind of like um, subtle and remains realistic, right? Rooted, very, very rooted in reality. Um, yeah, these are things that we expect to see already in the human body, and it could just be that mirror thing that makes us appreciate it more. So, anyways, what we want to do. Oh, by the way, I do recommend installing Blender. If you haven't already, install Blender because that's what in today's lesson I do want to talk a little bit about using 3D, working in 3D as well for design stuff. So anyways, we have this character. We want to break it down to its simple shapes. So this is what I have, and then maybe we'd have like a beak, right? We can have a little eye, we could have a half line there, just to kind of give us a sense of if this is the eye, head from in perspective, or from the side, what might that look like in perspective? We'd have like a halfway eye line. On that, we have these two eyes sitting somewhere. Reference the front view. Say okay. There's a beak, and in each corner there's kind of an eye shape. Okay. I haven't fully established here like what the beak looks like. Is it that kind of a beak? So how does this beak come into contact with the face? Is it like that? Right? So basically, what is the cross section of that beak? Is it flat around the bottom, round around the top? Is it just round all the way through? That's something that again, that information isn't something I can glean from either the front or the side. It's something I have to decide myself, because I could look at this from the front and I could just as well say that the cross section of the beak is something like this. It's wide at top and narrow at the bottom, which in 3D would look more like this. Right? Let me change my drawing utensil here to something a little bit more like that. By the way, Krita has really nice brushes. There we go. That's nice. So yeah, so this, just to redraw this, it would be something like, could be something like this. Right? So you kind of picture that shape where it's flatter up top and then it tapers in on the side, flatter, tapers in, right? Or like I said, it could be more like this where it's round up top, kind of flatter below. Again, we always draw through our forms so that we understand them. And that's the main reason why. Don't be too proud to say, "Oh, I know how this works." You know, by all means, go for it. See if you can just draw it without drawing through. But if you come into, if you have problems, go draw through. It'll kind of keep you honest. Okay. So there's a lot of different ways we could take a similar silhouette and suggest structure or form to it, right? Just depending on how we draw these cross contour lines. All right, so what we want to do is find the kind of a short form way of drawing our character in perspective. So we want to really have a good sense of simple shapes, right? So we can have our head shape here, right? So if it's tilting down, that front line is starting to arc downwards if the character is looking down. Eyes are looking down like so, right? That beak is going to sit here on the face, kind of point downwards as well. And then the body will kind of be up here. The head will come in contact with the body like something like that. Okay, and maybe the body is also tilted forward, so we see more of the shoulders. So we're seeing the shoulders there, seeing more like this area, right, of the character. Okay, and then the body would be overlapping, so it'd be kind of like overlapping this part. So this is kind of how we also can draw foreshortened poses fairly easily. Once we break a complex character down into simpler shapes and forms, we can kind of get a more sophisticated kind of representation of what that character might look like tilted forwards or lying on their back, for example, or, looking at them from below or something like that. Okay, and then if we can think of, maybe there's this, we divided this up, maybe a front, a top half, the body, and a bottom half, like get our underpants shape. Right, then we can kind of sketch that in here, kind of imagine where each of those legs would come into contact with it. This near leg will be a little bit more foreshortened. Okay, I'll just kind of erase away a few lines here so we can kind of get a sense of, we're not actually seeing this. This is all blocked. This is all kind of hidden, right? This is all just me drawing through, seeing through my object to the backside. But I need that so that I can understand where that leg needs to kind of connect in here, right? So I know how much the body here is going to overlap the legs. So how much of the legs should show? Where should the legs start from? I don't want to guess, right? I don't ever want to come in here and say, I think the legs start here, right? Or I think the legs should start here, right? We don't want to guess. We want to really know. The easiest way to do that is draw a center line, like so. And forgive me, my drawing's not going to be as good because I'm using a tablet like you guys. So now we're the same. Because on my other computer I have a Cintiq, right, which is a screen you can draw directly onto it. But now I am drawing on my stylus, so you guys can see how I draw when I do that. Okay, so we have this, right? And this gives us an indication of where those legs emerge from. right? And so that's the general idea. But sorry, I didn't kind of completely map these out. This is a cylindrical shape. And on the case of like this character, I'm picturing his legs being like bird legs. So I have this like really nice opportunity to get these cross contour lines that will help suggest the three-dimensional structure of this. Not only will they suggest that, but they also suggest like which direction it's pointing in space. We can use these cross contour lines, right? If I have a shape like this, right? Is this pointing this way? I don't have enough information to tell, right? Is it pointing like that? Is it going into space like that? Or is it going this way? Right? I really don't have enough information. I could make it do either, right? Based on the cross contour. If I wanted to be like this, I'd find an opportunity to do like some Y lines or some cross contour lines that help it to look like it's going this way, right? And I would do something similar here for the toes. So they read as three-dimensional, okay? Or we could do the opposite, right? If I had a similar shape, I could make it look like it's pointed that way, right? And if this was like, let's say this is an arm, you can see the bones in there, right? Okay, so you can kind of picture how that works. And it was just a simple shape, like too little information to tell which way it's pointing. Now we have a little bit extra. We can kind of make sense. If we're doing this though, again, make sure the end of the shape is kind of rounded off in the correct way so that it actually really does make sense. All right. Uh, okay, so all that being said, we're doing this, simplifying the forms so that we can kind of help pose our character. And so we want to do a couple things when doing this. We want to draw the character, break them down into simple shapes so we can pose them. And then we also want to figure out like a really shorthand way of drawing our character over and over again. So how can I say all of this without having to go in and break down all the structure and do all this kind of stuff? Is there not a better way to work it out? And there is and there isn't. It's kind of a comfort level thing, but what you'll find is if you do this next exercise with a character, and if you commit to the exercise and you do it properly, you will ultimately find faster ways of redrawing your character over and over and over again. All right, so there's an exercise, and I think I briefly mentioned it before, but basically, you give yourself a certain amount of time, such as 60 minutes, right? And then you ask yourself, or you get a timer. You set a timer or a repeat timer for 1 minute, right? A 1 minute timer. And then every minute for 60 minutes, so every minute for an hour, um, you redraw your character doing a pose. Every minute um, for 1 hour, you draw a new pose. And the ideal for this exercise is you don't look at reference. You just pull from what's in your brain, and you kind of try to figure it out yourself. Okay, you might come up with a drawing that's just like this. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do next. I don't know what to do next. might come up with a drawing that's just a stick figure. You know, you might come up with a drawing that's like really broken. Doesn't look right at all. Doesn't look like a character, right? Um, but the idea is if you stick with this for a full hour, eventually you'll get to the point where you're able to kind of quickly map out your character, kind of lay down the most important information first, right? You'll ignore all the extraneous stuff. Like you just kind of get the key silhouette type stuff in first. And that will be kind of your method. And from doing this, you'll find your character's short form. Find out what are those kind of key important shapes or forms you need to put down first and foremost in order to make it so that this character looks makes it so that this looks like your character. Okay. Okay. Notice how when I draw arms here, I draw cross sections, cross section of the forearm near the elbow, cross section of the forearm near the wrist, and then maybe just overlap that with a hand, a shape for a hand. Right. Cross section of the midsection here, leg coming out, leg coming out. One leg can be coming further forward, one leg can be thrusting further back. Right? Thinking about perspective. Whoops. Shift in Krita does not do what it does in Photoshop. Shift in Krita changes your brush size. Okay, but thinking about horizon line, where is that horizon line? How does that affect my feet position if one foot is in front and one foot's behind? What does all that look like? Okay. Right. So that's effectively how all this works. Okay, so we're going to do this not for 60 minutes. Next semester, when we do animation, this becomes even more important because you can imagine you want to be able to redraw your character, you know, walking, for example. So you need to kind of have drawing one. See how we draw through? So this is the near side, far side, dot, dot, dot. Draw through. We need to be able to redraw our character. Try to keep the proportions similar. Body goes down a little bit, right? We need to just kind of be able to redraw our character over and over again. And maybe if we want them to kind of turn, look at the camera, wave, kind of do that because we're just kind of shape, 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 right? While keeping in mind, yes, it's a shape, but we kind of have some understanding of what its form would also be. Right? And doing our best to try to keep it as what's called on model, right? As possible on model. And this becomes important for what we're doing now because not only we are going to animate next semester, but this semester we are going to make a multi-panel comic where we have the same character, you know, maybe on one panel sitting down on a bench feeding the people. If this is a bird man, right? It's feeding people. What a bird feed people sandwiches. Okay, and then hopefully you can also see how this ties into the 7Ps, because for each panel we want to audition a pose, right? We want to get the right pose for each panel. We don't necessarily want to kind of stick with our first idea. We want to work out our pose idea first and foremost, and then kind of go from there. So a bag of like people food, whatever that is, candies, people. The food. Anyways, this is you get the idea. Um, so yeah, so this is kind of like we want to be able to do this, and then maybe in the next panel, our bird person is like, oh, what's going on over there? And I think I'm going to go with a different beak. Beak will just kind of be like that. Facial expression if we want to have, right? So pose, personality, perspective, all these things are starting to come into play. What is he so shocked to see? And then it's just some other thing, right? But these are just kind of like very first pass, rough stage, kind of like let's map out our drawings, and then we loop back to our design and say, okay, is this on model? Yes or no. We want to just kind of double check that our proportions are accurate and all that kind of stuff. Ideally, when we do this, we also break it down to the point where we can say our character is how many heads tall, right? So remember the 8 heads exercise? Now we're going to say this bird character is one, about two, about 4 heads tall, right? The body here, we can kind of say the body's realistically maybe 1.5 heads tall, right? And the legs, from the hip here, the legs are about 2 heads. The thigh is about 1 head. The foreleg is about 1 head. Body is 1.5. Okay. How wide are each of these? How wide is the body? We could say the body is uh, probably the same thing, about 1.5 head widths wide. So that can guide us, right? That can guide us as we're doing this. Can kind of keep those ratios in mind as we are designing this. And not only do we need to know that, we need to know the height to the width ratio of our head, or whatever our canon measurement is. In this case, it's the head. So I need to know how wide is the head relative to its height. Some of the details I'll ignore. Ignore the ears; they're kind of trivial. I want to know where on the head the eye line is. So it's about 1/3 of the way down the head, right? And that's also where the beak happens to be. So knowing that the head is squarish from the front, and maybe it's not as deep as it is wide, I should be able to kind of redraw this head in perspective, because the box for this head would be something like this, right? And then about 1/3, we're going to have those eyes and the beak. Nose, we're going to make it something like this. Right? So that's kind of the idea. And then same thing, body. The width of the body is kind of not quite as wide. And it's just a little bit taller than the head and everything like that. Okay, and that's kind of informs the rest of our design. Dot 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 here for the rear leg. Okay, respecting perspective here. So this leg is going to be below the horizon line and closer to us. This one will be below the horizon line and further from us. So we'll have that diagonal relationship that is maintained through all these elements here. If the head turns, right, and the head is not square to the perspective, then it'll still converge to the same vanishing line, but it won't follow exactly the same. It won't go to the same vanishing point per se, if that makes sense. All right. So anyways, so that's the whole purpose of this, the whole idea. So let's do this for a few minutes. Let's do 10 minutes. So we'll go until about 6 o'clock. Ideally, take your own character. Um, just work to break it down into its simplest shapes and forms. And then we will choose a theme. Okay, so for this exercise, we generally choose a theme like waking up, winning the lottery, working out, running, being surprised, seeing a friend, those kinds of things. Okay, and then we have to exercise our creative muscles to come up with new ideas over and over and over again. It'll be challenging, but this is a nice exercise that kind of helps the more creative side of our brain kind of engage with the material. There's, from what I've read, and some people, agree with this, maybe some don't. But there's a book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. And there's a lady, I think her name is Betty Edwards, and she basically believes that anyone can draw. Anyone can draw, and anyone can draw really well. But sometimes we just have to get out of our own way. Sometimes you're imagine trying to lift a muscle, right? Trying to bench press using your nose or your head or your neck, right? You're just not going to have the right muscles behind the exercise that you're trying to do. So her argument is that, some people, they try to draw with the left side of their brain, right? Which is more verbal, linguistic. So that's the talky side of your brain. It's going to be like, oh, I know how to do this. What are you doing? The drawing doesn't look right. A table is rectangular. So if I'm drawing a table and it looks like this, and this is what I'm seeing, that part of my brain is going to jump in and say, no, 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 that's wrong. That's really bad. You're not good at this. Table should be rectangular. It shouldn't have that weird abstract shape. What is that? That doesn't look like anything, right? So it's going to try to take over and control the drawing, and you're going to maybe listen to it, and you're going to come up with something like, yeah, I think table's rectangular. So you listen to it, and then you try to do what you think makes sense instead of just accepting what your eyes are telling you. And so you instead of drawing this, you draw that, right? Or you draw something like this. And it's just like it sabotages your efforts, right? So you want to just accept what you see, as weird and unidentifiable or unquantifiable or unnameable as that information is. You want to just draw that. And drawing is truly that. From my experience, it's subjective. It's relationships, and that's all it is. Um, one thing is lighter or darker than another thing. One thing is greener or bluer than the other thing, right? One thing is redder or less red than the other thing. One thing is more saturated or less saturated. There are no absolutes when it comes to drawing, right? One thing is bigger or smaller. One thing is kind of like the position of it relative to this other thing is right here. Like I encourage you guys to do an exercise, look at things, right, and try to map out the relationships of things. So if you see like that table, for example, try to find the diagonal lines, the angles between things. Say find one corner of a thing and try to figure out, where's another corner of that thing, right? What's that diagonal? Or are they aligned vertically? Or are they aligned horizontally? So try to find those kinds of relationships. If you draw like and approach things that way, this will go much easier for you. And I do believe that anyone can draw. I do also believe though that some people are more naturally predisposed to just accepting what their brain sees and tells them. They're not going to put any kind of judgment on that, and they will likely have an easier time kind of just drawing what they see. For characters and stuff like that, we want to use that same side of our brain, the right side of our brain, that is very good at judging visual and spatial kind of relationships. That's the side of our brain where if someone throws a ball to you, you're not going to say, "Oh, that ball is, going along this angle. I have to catch it because I have to move my hand here." You won't say it. You can't give yourself the instructions. You have to react in the instant, right? You have to make tons of micro calculations based on the rate at which you see that ball getting bigger, right? That tells you how fast it's going, right? You kind of judge how far away is the person who threw it. How big is that ball relative to the person's hand? You have to make all of these really tiny micro kind of calculations in a split second. And then you have to decide, oh, I have to put my hand here to catch it, right? There's a part of our brain that's very good at that. If someone throws a ball to you, you know exactly where to put your hand and catch it. I mean, assuming you've, played catch before. But that's the part of our brain that we want to use for these kinds of drawing exercises. Okay, and it doesn't have words. That part of our brain does not have words. It just deals in the abstract. It loves abstraction. So if you feed yourself like a lot of abstract elements and abstract things, that part of your brain will naturally take over. The left side of your brain will naturally say, "Oh, you know what? I can't handle this." It may protest very loudly, and you might get very frustrated. You might feel very anxious, but eventually it will subside, and the right side of your brain will take over. So a couple of exercises, just kind of going on a bit of a tangent here. A couple of exercises you guys can do. I challenge you. If you feel like you're not a good drawer, try drawing a picture. Get a picture of a portrait, right? A photograph of somebody. Draw it. Turn it upside down. This is the one of the exercises in her book. Turn it upside down, and then try drawing it upside down. Okay, because now the eyes and the nose, you can't label things anymore. You can't say, "Oh, that's an eye. That's a nose. That's a lip. This is a forehead." Because you can't place those labels, you automatically just start drawing abstractions. So you say, "Oh, there's a shape here. Let me copy that shape. Oh, there's another shape here. Let me copy that other shape." Okay? It won't be necessarily totally perfect, but you'll find that if you just focus on that, copying different shapes, you will naturally kind of arrive at something that looks pretty similar to the initial portrait that you started drawing. And then when you flip it over, you go, "Oh, cool! It looks like a person, or it looks like that thing." So, anyways, just a side kind of challenge for you guys. All right, so we went a little off track here. I was going to take 10 minutes, and we were going to do this exercise. So we basically spent 10 minutes talking about the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain. But let's jump back now, and we'll do this exercise for the next 10 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to choose a theme. My theme is going to be, say, surprise, or let's just see. sneaking up on somebody. So this character is sneaking up on somebody or something, and that could be anything. It's fairly broad. I could come up with a multitude of ideas from that. Okay. So my goal is every minute to redraw this character sneaking up on something. It's going to get a minute timer, a repeat timer. Just doing this on my okay. So I've started my first one, and yeah. So surprise or sneaking up on something. Okay. And we won't necessarily see the full result of this exercise in 1 minute, but or in 10 minutes. It's more like a kind of a good exercise to do over the course of an hour, because by the end of that hour, you'll find that you've really settled into this exercise, and the drawings that you make, you'll find like, whoa, I didn't know I could draw that well. And the ideas you're coming up with, they will be very kind of like some of the best ideas you feel like you've had. And I don't know what it is. I find it's almost like without fail. I might struggle for 50 minutes of this exercise, but with inevitably the last 10 minutes will be like golden. Okay, so that's one. Let's do another one. And the idea here is we're iterating, right? So we're iterating on the idea of, in this case, sneaking up on somebody. But we can iterate within this iteration, if that makes sense. So I can choose one pose and redraw it from a different angle, right? We can apply the 7Ps even while we're doing this exercise. So we can re-tackle the same drawing from a different perspective, or with a different personality, with a slightly different pose. This behind some kind of hedge or something like that here. So you see, I'm not necessarily going in and putting all the kind of construction lines. It's not a bad idea to do that. I have to, I'm not trying to perfect any of my drawings. I would love it if the drawings came out great. They're not, uh, or not as great as I'd like. But I have to move forward, right? So if I like the idea, but I didn't like the execution, then I can iterate. Like I said, I could try it again. Kind of revisit those proportions and just make sure that I have like a good sense of how big and or how small things should be. Kind of go from there. And I'm not afraid of making a mistake. I'm not afraid of failing. The cost to me is minimal. Um, if I were to do this for an hour and I, messed up 3 drawings or messed up even 10 drawings, I spent 10 minutes on that. It's not the end of the world. So didn't quite get through this one, but I'll tackle it again, right? Start over from the beginning. I find this exercise, by the way, really good to do on paper versus versus digital. Digital is also fine, but paper, it's easier to walk away from a failed drawing on paper than it is on digital for some reason. Digital, you want to edit, you want to tweak, refine. It's way easier to do so. Okay, so I'm getting closer, but I actually need to iterate some more. I think the pose needs to lean more, be more sneaky, right? And there's no right, there's no wrong. It's just what do I like? I'm searching. I'm just looking for something. Coming up with ideas, right? But I'm like pushing the pose. I'm like, how can I make it better? You want to see how designs evolve over time. Look at early Garfield comics, right? Look at The Simpsons when it first started. Garfield's probably a better example because it was always the same artist. The Simpsons changed artists. Okay, so let's start a new one. Let's kind of just come up with some brand new ideas. We can do sneaking towards the camera. See how like I kind of get the bounding shape, and then I might put a just a quick line for the center line and the eye line here, but I don't necessarily kind of go super duper elaborate. I'm just trying to kind of find that balance between silhouette, right, shape, and structure. I want to be considering both. I don't want to be, too dogmatic about either. Let's try this again. And what I find, like for me, uh, this is like my warm up. This is like, if you play sports or if you've done dance or anything like that, or you play an instrument. There's a warm up period where you just kind of reacquaint yourself with like, all the things that are you're capable of doing. And I find that this is kind of like a nice way to do that. Some students will say, "Well, can I look at references?" I recommend not looking at references. I recommend rather trying to imagine yourself doing that pose. Um, Try to feel it, you know, and then through feeling it, think, "Oh, my leg lifts up," my head tilts this way, my arm would go like this, and then try to draw it from that information. Um, because it's more of an exercise for your creative muscles than if you were to just copy a drawing, right? Once you're kind of ready to lock into something, absolutely, kind of go in and get all the references you need. But if you can kind of do a first pass, just kind of trying to figure it out yourself, it's always valuable. See how far you can get without reference. And that's mainly for like kind of if you're trying to kind of take a creative approach and you want to come up with something like unique. Looking at reference, we're automatically going to, copy a little bit. Okay. And then, for me, once I start to really relax and then I stop like caring quite as much, that's when I start coming up with really cool ideas that like, is it really sneaking or is it just kind of like me now kind of like coming up with like I'm finding ways to make it make sense, right? And that's when magic starts happening, I find. Like, is he sneaking or is he kind of like playing peekaboo? Like, who's he fooling? Like, is he sneaking to him or is he sneaking to me? Like, what does that look like? There's more story kind of coming through. And I find that you have to do it. I mean, maybe some people, again, there's a predisposition thing. Some people have to work through that, that process a little bit more. But then some people, they might just naturally be like, oh, I'm going to try this crazy idea. Um, it might be more naturally creative that way. All right, so last one. All right, and so that's basically it. So these are just some different ideas, and I can go back and review. And I like this one. This one had some promise, but a little too stiff. A little too. This one's all right, but maybe could have gotten a little more fluidity into it. This one, again, one of my first ideas. Didn't really like it that much. Maybe there's something there. This one's kind of interesting. This one, could be interesting. This one's interesting. This one's interesting. This one's interesting. So I have about 5 out of the 10 that, I might want to kind of take a second look at, maybe pursue a little further. But I have a series of ideas now that I can kind of move forward with. Let's turn this alarm thing off. Okay. All right, so that's ultimately the whole thought process there. That's the exercise. I do encourage you guys to do this, for yourselves. And I see a comment, Ariana, stepped away for a bit. By virtue of this being on YouTube, you can absolutely go back and rewatch, rewind, and catch back up. Just making sure, showing a little funny on my computer. I just want to make sure that you guys are seeing this whole screen properly, right? You're seeing my whole screen? Because, like, whatever reason, it's really cramped on my. Oh no, yeah, you guys are good. Okay, um, so the next thing we want to do, now we're going to take a look at putting it all together. Okay, so let's make a full scene. Have a characters kind of respect perspective of an environment that we create, and we're going to map out the environment. We're going to do thumbnails. We're going to go through that whole process, and then just set up a kind of a basic scene, just kind of high level. We're not going to go into like the detailed rendering version of this. We're just going to kind of map it out, but just kind of so you guys can see how we pull everything together, get a posed character living in a space. Okay. Did I put the due date today? If I put the due date today, I'll change that. Uh, okay, I'll fix that. I'll make it due. It's supposed to be due this Friday. Thanks for catching that. Okay, I'm just changing it quickly now. and I'm sure you guys have tons going on. Is Yeah, I'll make it due Friday. Um, I do recommend get it out of the way today. So you can kind of focus on the anatomy stuff. But okay. But the idea is this will help you kind of prepare for the last assignment. Okay, so I've changed the date to Friday. All right, so we're going to take this and we're going to build out a fuller scene. So ideally, we're going to do the 7 Ps. I'm going to do this in a fresh document. File, new, create. And I always find it so cool how quickly you can kind of make something out of nothing. Start with a few shapes, see what it looks like, and then be like, oh, this could be this. And for me, when I was doing it this morning with my class, it's like, oh, clear, this could be a Birdman. Um, no real intention for the purpose of it at that point was just to show them, how to just to do a recap of like how the rib cage and the pelvis generally kind of come together and how we should be mindful of this the side view of a character when designing. But yeah, now it's kind of evolved into something a little bit bigger. So we're going to do our 7 Ps. Okay, and this will be just to kind of put together a simple scene. While making this simple scene, I recommend that you guys also think about how you can do something story-wise. Okay, so 3 or more panels. We're going to block it all out. Um, what could be a simple storyline with this character? Okay, so I thinking right off the top of my head, just based on kind of what I've already done here. Storyline, I like this idea of a bird person feeding humans candy, right? And then looking and seeing something, getting surprised, and then maybe sneaking, right? Kind of see something. And then the final panel reveal would probably be like the big kind of reveal, the big surprise. I don't know what that would be. Maybe a person, right? Seeing someone in their living room, person, a human being with a bird in the cage, right? As corny as that is. So yeah, I think that would be my comic. So let's kind of like take this through the 7 Ps. So my purpose, I have two purposes. One is to uh, kind of demo the process for students. Right? And then to make a kind of a silly comic, hopefully make someone laugh. Okay. Um, my protagonist slash plot would be like an alternate universe. It would be the Birdman, I guess. Birdman in alt universe where birds are people and people are birds. Okay, and proportions I've already kind of worked out. Okay, so proportions are something like that. For my plot, I can put in like some of the story too, as well, since this is a kind of a sequential, so it's a bit of a script to it, right? So I can say uh, feeding people, um, sees something, sneaks up, sees human with pet bird. Okay. Um, so my proportions are here. Poses. Okay. This time I'm going to have multiple. So I like something like this. Just grab our person there too. Probably want to sketch out my people, my bird people, see what they look like as well. Um, I kind of like what's going on here, and I could be elaborate with this, like if I wanted to. We could imagine a comic that's multiple panels long. I have one pose here, so he's sneaking for a long time. If I have like pose or panel after panel after panel after panel of this character sneaking, right? It becomes like more of a big thing. But I think for the purposes of like the story and the delivery that I want, I probably don't want that much. I don't want it to be that elaborate. So this, um, I do like this. I think this one for sure. This one's interesting because it kind of like ties into the park bench. I like some of the pose, but maybe something to modify. But there's something there that I do enjoy. Okay, yeah. All right. So yeah, so those are some of the poses that I want to grab. So what I'm going to do is I will just capture them with my lasso select. Control C, Control V. And bring it all in the same area. There's this one, this one, this one, this one. Okay. Copy this. And these are some of the poses that I want. Okay. Go for personality. So the bird person will be kind of, you know, kind, honest, and then also curious. maybe a little bit self-righteous as well. Okay, and then perspective. Kind of want to have like a bit of a normal perspective, so I'm thinking like maybe a lower horizon line here, or you know what, a higher horizon line here. We'll have vanishing points, have like a bench, bird, and we'll have like all our little like bird people kind of arranged here. Their relationship to the horizon line should all be the same, so maybe they don't cross the horizon line. Right, so assuming each of these, this is just the shape of, or this scale of each of my bird people. So if you remember when we talked about perspective, we have our horizon line. If you have a person here, and they're crossing the horizon line at their waist, far away person, assuming they're the same size and they're standing on the same ground plane, they'll cross the horizon line at the same point. Right? And if they're really close, same thing. This is kind of like a very quick way to kind of map out those overall kind of perspective relationships and make sure that scale references are all kind of accurate and correct. I have like some kind of a tree here. Maybe some kind of a path. Hard to see what's going on, but yeah, there's stuff happening there. Okay, probably won't explore this too much. I kind of have a fairly even regular sense of what I want to do. And the point of this whole exercise is not to make like the most dynamic, action-packed kind of concept arty type artwork. Like I'm not trying to sell somebody something. I'm just trying to tell a story and make them laugh. So I'm focusing on clarity, trying to choose a camera angle that best frames everything, right? So I get all my bird people in there. I have my people birds, I guess, and my bird person. They're all kind of within the frame. I prioritize the space of the ground here in order to kind of show more of these people things on the ground here. Um, Incidentally, in terms of proportions, how big are those people birds relative to an actual bird is kind of an important consideration. Oops. So I've got to figure out what these people birds look like, right? What their proportion is, how big are they relative to the bird people, and then later on I'll have like probably a regular person, you know, sitting in their house, pipe, reading a newspaper, and with a caged bird. Just realized I like drawing birds a lot. I always have a bird in something somewhere. Um, yeah, so we'll have that, and how big they are relative to each other is also, like I said, important. So let's make this all a little smaller. So all I'm doing now, kind of just mapping out all my basic ingredients, right? Because later on I'm going to be pulling all of this stuff together. Okay. And he probably won't be standing up, this person, but we should figure out also like what are their proportions like? What is all that look like? All right. So perspective. So first shot one will be something like this. Shot two, we could probably keep it somewhat the same. Probably just go tighter, right? This is more of a what's called an establishing shot. Right, sets the scene. Then we go a little tighter. Close up, can kind of reuse as much of this as we can. And here we'll have more of this kind of a pose, where a tighter shot like this is designed to show acting, emotion, expression, right? So we can kind of see what this character is feeling, seeing. So just as they're about to throw out some more candies, they're like, what? Seeing something. And then the next one will be sneaking. This will be kind of a wider shot, a full body shot. This is a, let's call this a close up. This will be a long shot, or a, yeah, full body shot. And in this, we'll have like that kind of a pose. I'll choose more more of a slightly down shot on this one. So the horizon line will be high, right? Higher, maybe out of frame. Right? We're choosing more of like a downward angle on this. So you can get like more of a tactical sense of what's going on. There's a hedge here. Character's looking over the hedge. Okay, all that stuff we talked about, breaking our character down into simplistic forms and structures is helping me here to be able to redraw this character as, you know, simple geometric shapes in a perspective environment, right? And this kind of just goes back to the whole left brain, right brain thing. If I can accept that, you know, yes, it's a head, yes, it's a beak, yes, it's a body, but I can just treat it as a simple graphic abstract shape or form, and then just treat it as I would any other form in perspective, then, you know, it becomes a little bit academic to draw. If you can draw like any kind of simple shape in perspective, um, you could draw this character, right? Okay, a lot of this stuff I won't see. It'll be covered by this hedge, which is fine. Save myself some hard work later. Another kind of, I think, beginner mistake is to work hard on something. We feel like I got to show everything. Absolutely not. Feel free to hide it. Drawings look weird if we try to show everything at every time. We definitely want to have some things visible, yes, for sure, but only what's needed to be, right? The rest is implied. And so long as we get the kind of the pose right and the perspective right, this will read as accurate. Get some kind of like a picket fence in here in the back, just to suggest like this is somebody's property. Okay, and then the last shot will be what's called an over-the-shoulder shot. Okay, this is kind of used to show like this is what my character's seeing. This is that Gears of War kind of camera angle. So horizon line will be a little higher. We could actually make the horizon line maybe level with whatever our character's eyes would be, right? Something like that. And how we're going to be looking inside this person's house. So maybe there's like a window here, right? A big window. And in there we'll see like a person in their chair, right? With a kind of a bird cage. Okay, so it's not going to read that clearly just yet, but ultimately it should. And here's going to be the bottom of that thing. We'll have some grass here and all that kind of stuff, and maybe some bricks on the wall, just to again further say this is like this outside of somebody's house. Maybe some drapes in here, just to again further set the stage on this is X, Y, or Z, right? So maybe put the birds there so we can have like a nice window line there. Okay, and then, can do like the anime thing where we have like a giant sweat bubble here. And that even gives me an idea. Maybe he's cooking a bird, right? He's like cooking putting a turkey in the oven. It's a Thanksgiving thing. So I can always adjust my idea. And that would speak to why is he nervous, and then why is he sneaking and all that kind of stuff. Why did what he saw freak him out so much? And then yeah. So I think that would be a better scene actually, to see somebody kind of putting turkey, right, in the oven. And the ideas they come to you if you stay open to them, right? If you don't get too fixated on I got to do this or I got to do that, just stay open, kind of work out what you know, and let yourself kind of be open to new ideas that present themselves along the way. Those ideas may come, they may not, but be open to them if they do, and if it's a good idea, go with it, or if you like the idea better, go with it. And in this case, I probably don't even have to show the person. Maybe I do. Uh, maybe I just have the hands serving it, carrying it. Some kind of apron or something like that. Um, yeah, so this is all stuff I'll need to figure out, but that's the general idea. Okay, so now we can kind of just get started on one of these shots, maybe the establishing shot, um, or any of these shots. It doesn't really matter. We just want to see what that process is of making the background, sketching it out. Using this what we've established here as a basic plan, um, and not throwing anything away. We have all this nice information. Let's kind of take advantage of that. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's take advantage of our roughs. Save this. Call this Birdman Thanksgiving. Okay. So, uh, so what we want to do, we'll choose one of these images and we'll just do a kind of a sketch of it. So let's get this one. Control C. And Krita, I know we're not using Krita, we're using Photoshop, but Krita does have some pretty nice comic book templates. I've never really used them, to be honest with you. So we got manga, European comic, US comic um, templates. Okay, which is nice because from my understanding, see, it even has it all broken down for us here. We have our sketch layer. We have our, I don't know what this mask does. I guess this gives us the grids. That's my guess. We have our color. We have our ink. Okay, so this looks like it's giving us the actual kind of overlay grid. Okay, so we take our sketch, drop it in. I don't even know where it went. So I must not have copied in the right thing. Just go back here. So I'm on the wrong layer. Control C. And let's delete this layer. Control V. There we go. So first thing I'm realizing is that the panels that I have here probably are not optimal for the story I want to tell. Something like that would actually be pretty nice. I actually don't mind this. I like this nice wider kind of look. It's more like a webtoon style, right? It's just like vertical panels. So I tweaked it. I tweaked the proportions a little bit, but I'm going to knock down the opacity on this. And all I'm doing here is I'm just going to use this for my rough sketch. Okay, and so all I'm going to do is I'm just going to, draw in all the lines that I need. I'm not kind of holding anything back. I'm not trying to make something pretty. I'm just trying to, make sure I have all the information I need for this drawing. I'm going to mess with my mask here. I don't know exactly how this works, but try this something. Just make it wider. Like that. That works. And then I'll just crop this a little bit as well. All right. Oops. So again, I'm gonna knock down the opacity of my roof here, so it's like there enough. It's there for me to kind of work off of. And then in here is where my kind of bird people will be. They don't have to be as big as I've made them here, but I just want to block out their, their basic kind of shape, proportion, kind of have their like contact position with the ground worked out. Use these cross contour lines to help suggest the forms. Okay. We have another one here. This reminds me of those cartoons where they trick someone into thinking they're a chicken. Just gonna okay. So I like some of this idea, but I think it's not quite reading right. Again, this is a rough, right? So anything goes. I can kind of throw everything down in this version. I can make it as messy as I want because I'm going to redraw it. Okay, it's just to kind of inform my my next step. Okay, the design of this is going to be important. I want it to look like, like a very simple kind of like human bird kind of hybrid thing. It's not quite working. I'll take the idea. Try to get maybe a basic shape, right? Have it more so facing us. There we go. So now we can see both eyes simultaneously, so I can get that kind of funny expression there that I was going for. I actually had an idea for a game similar to this a while back, and now I'm like, oh, I should make that thing. Uh, kind of very, very similar. It's about feeding pigeons. Okay, it's like the eyes more so facing downwards, so that um, you get a sense looking at food. It's trying to look at food. I think that expression also, again, I think I'm noodling a little bit too much. A little bit too much I'm noodling. Try to get higher level kind of decisions down here. So details on the face, it doesn't really matter that much. But we'll go something like that. All right, so we have a few birds there. We want some, maybe one in the background here as well. See how just putting a simple placeholder in like saves me a little bit from having to go in and think about how big does this need to be. I can kind of, it's already kind of worked out. Let's get this tree in here as well. It's gonna be a big kind of oak tree or something. And what I've found is when I draw quick, when I draw loose and fast, I automatically get like movement in my drawings. They don't become stiff feeling and overworked. I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but it's got movement. It feels more fluid. The line looks more confident, um, and it automatically becomes just a little bit more visually appealing. Okay, draw through. So even though there's the bench there, I'm drawing right through it, so I can see the far side. Not the far side, but I can see, sorry, even the part that's being blocked by the character that will be sitting on it. Um, I ought to start thinking about where's that horizon line. Rough in a simple kind of grid here to be keep it close, approximate. Because I'm in an outdoor scene, I can take a few liberties. I don't have to be as precise with everything. These lines on the bench, I don't need them to be perfectly even. I want to have some like variety to that, so I don't want it to be totally even. I'm trying to make it deliberately. The term is wonky, right? I'm wonkifying it so that it's a little more stylized, a little more visually interesting. Let's say there's like a big kind of tree here as well. We said there's going to be some kind of a path that leads through. I'll just put a kind of like some suggestions of form and detail here on the ground. You have some foreground elements, rocks and things like that. See how adding like things in the foreground, this helped to flesh out the scene. Let's put a little bush here. Maybe this human thing. I found like some something behind this bush. And what I can't stress enough is like, let's just lay everything down, right? Let's kind of just really make it, as messy as we feel like we need to make it. As long as we can still make sense of what's going on here, that's all that really matters. Okay, we'll have like our bag, character's food. We'll have our character sitting in here. Okay. Just thinking of like almost like just like a bean bag. Get those feet in there. Head will be tilted down a bit, right? So I'm just kind of getting that structure. That head tilting down. Eyes, beak. I'm smiling a little bit. You know what? I'm gonna maybe back up a little bit here. Right now he's looking like right here. I kind of want him to look out more. So his head shouldn't be tilted down as far as I've gotten it. So tilt it up just a little bit more. There we go. That's much better. He's digging in here for his snacks. And say throwing out some stuff with the other hand. And that's basically it. Okay, think about what I want in the background here. Probably just more trees. Right, so I'll just kind of suggest in what those kind of tree forms might look like. Maybe some bushes here as well. Close off the back. Avoid tangents. I accidentally have a couple tangents here, so Let's make one thing clearly read in front of the other thing. Got some bush here. All right, and that's basically our first scene. And so from here, we would just kind of map things out, flat things out, and then kind of just start refining. Truthfully, before we were to do that, we probably want to just get rid of our first rough pass and just take this, use this as our second rough pass, and then clean up from there. This time when I clean up, I'm going to do all probably the background by itself and then the characters on separate layers, or at least on a separate layer. So I'll just do BG clean. Oops, or GB. BG clean. Okay, and then here I'd go back in and I'd just pick out just the trees, for example. All this stuff, like, but in a more realized version. That's going to appear in the background there. Again, don't have to trace it perfectly. I'm really trying to go for like a nice lively line. There's a really nice thick to thin on this line that I'm painting with, so I'm just leaning into that, pressing hard in some places, soft in some places, thinking about the type of texture that I'm trying to convey while I'm painting this. So which is kind of like a rock, or sorry, a log or wood texture. And again, that's not like, it's kind of like strange how it happens, but if you think of the way that, think of the material you're trying to draw while you're drawing it, you know, the right side of your brain, it just kind of has a way of like kind of making it work. It might take, you know, some practice, and it might not be exactly there, but there's an intuition that exists that we should try to tap into as much as possible. And we just want to just imply. We're just trying to imply, suggest more than anything. Not trying to say, you know, this is exactly how this has to work or look. This is really just kind of suggest, just trying to convey to our audience what this thing is. And again, like I said, I find that the quicker I go in some cases, and the more loose I draw, the more movement I end up having in my drawing. Now, a lot of this probably just comes from kind of pencil mileage and just doing it a lot. But a part of it's just from loosening up a little bit and just kind of not trying to be too perfect. It's a bit of both. But, you know, everyone's got a different style. Everyone's got a different approach. I have a friend, I think I mentioned him, comic book artist. He would not approach it this way at all. My style is a little more cartoony, a little looser, depending on what I'm doing, right? But he's going to take a much more methodical, kind of referenced approach to all this kind of stuff that I'm doing here. And as I mentioned, that absolutely look at reference. If you need to see what a tree looks like, or a bush, or a forest, or a park, you know, look at it. Don't necessarily just make it up, because there might be things that you're not thinking of that that will absolutely, you know, make their way into your sketch or your drawing. Things that are closer, I make the line a little thicker. Okay. And I can suggest a little bit more detail, a little more texture, a little more form. Generally speaking, just how I ink things or kind of clean things up. The outer line is going to be a little heavier than any of the interior lines. I like to have a lively line. It's not something that I necessarily do deliberately, but I think it's just something that has kind of like evolved in the way I work naturally, primarily because uh, growing up drawing, I would draw over the same thing a lot. I would say not this line, but this line, and I'd draw each successive line heavier and heavier and heavier, just to kind of like indicate this is the line that I need. So I'm used to kind of pressing harder and softer sometimes to do that. When I'm more sure of a line, or when I start something, usually starts heavier. When I'm unsure, it'll be a little lighter, thinner, etc. Okay, let's get this path going. Further back, I'll make it a little thinner. Again, as things overlap other things, I'll make it a little heavier. As it gets gradually closer, I'll make it a little heavier, the line as well. My design choices, you guys don't have to follow that, but you'll find that it's fairly common in pictures. People do that. Let's get this path in. All right, so we can knock out some of our rough, right? Let's get that bench in there. Okay, notice how I'm not making it like totally even. I'm definitely kind of mixing it up, making it a little more stylized. And then our characters will live on a separate layer. I'm not sure I'll get to all the characters, but let's get at least one worked out. Let's get the leg of this in. Let me change this a little bit. Okay. All right, so we have a nice background here. Just looking at it, trying to make sure that everything that we need to be here is here. Let's kind of just delineate some of these forms here at the back. Can imply some of these trees in the background as well. I don't have to draw them all in. So that's another thing. Like a lot can be suggested in art, especially with backgrounds. Like you can really just kind of suggest things. Um, see the classic example of like we got a brick wall, right? You don't have to draw in every brick per se. You could kind of just say there's a few bricks here. Oops, a few bricks here. You know, you could kind of strategically find some spots where you want to put those bricks in, and then we'll kind of see the rest of the wall as though it has bricks. So find ways to imply, right? And oftentimes you come up with a stronger design than if you were to draw everything yourself separately, individually. Right. So we have this backdrop, and what we'll do is go in, sorry, and just on a new layer, we'll make sure we get our bird guy. I could probably knock out my BG clean, and I'll do our main character line. Okay, I'm not going to go too crazy with this, but basically we're going to have our nose. And this is where, with the character, this is where you want to kind of maybe spend a little bit more time and really get it, where you want it. Drawing that hand, I'm actually not going to see it. It's going to be hidden here by the bag. Just reading the comments, and I see someone says it's disturbing, and I kind of see that. Maybe the candy reference makes it kind of weird. Maybe let's do something else instead of that. Whoops. So what else could it could be hamburgers? You know what? I'm gonna just go with my original idea. Why not? The reason I say that, sometimes, you kind of, sometimes it's good to pivot your idea based on, you think you came up with a better idea, but if you kind of like are like, sometimes it's a very thin line, right? Especially if you're going for comedy. If you too careful sometimes, it stops being funny, right? There's a very, very fine line, and I don't want any of us to ever come anywhere close to that line, in our classes. But there's a fine line when it comes to humor, like when you've gone too far, and when you've just kind of pushed the envelope just enough. That's right. Yeah. Chicken nuggets would be kind of weird because, like, why is he feeding them chicken nuggets? That would kind of like break the whole thing at the end where he gets surprised by somebody eating chicken, right? Or eating a bird. So, maybe for a single panel comic, yeah, maybe that makes sense or something. Or, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But I love the discussion. I love the debate. I think that's good. And kind of start thinking of ideas for what you're going to do for your own. I think that's how we want to that's how we want this to go. And just like I did for the background, I could do multiple roughs for the bird as well. If I feel like I'm not quite landing on the concept the way I want to. For our purposes, I just want to move forward, so I'm gonna kind of commit to something. And then, what else? I saw a man feeding geese at the park. Trying to think what else he had with him. Bicycle maybe. I don't know. Not super sold on these feet. Something about them's not quite doing it for me. Again, I'm maybe kind of starting to noodle a little bit here. Better if I had, I don't have to work out the design here. I can work it out elsewhere and then kind of come back. Something is not sitting right with me with regards to this. I think it might be this foot here. And it's hard to say what uh, it is that kind of Yeah, I think that was what that was it. I don't know what it is, why I was able to identify that there was just this one toe kind of coming in too much. Um, yeah, sometimes sometimes you're lucky and you can identify what it is, and sometimes you can't. If you can give it to another artist or show it to somebody who's a little bit more experienced, that is always helpful to kind of troubleshoot a drawing because when you're so close to it, when you're doing it yourself, there's things that there are problems that you just can't see, things that aren't reading properly, things that are not like they lose their appeal because of some design choice you made. Um, and those are problems. But the biggest problem is if your intent doesn't come across. Like if your drawing doesn't read that way. Like if someone doesn't know what you're trying to say, um, or if something that's important that they need to kind of pick up on in your picture doesn't read properly, then there's no way they can kind of really understand, your picture. And I think I'm just gonna cheat this leg a little bit. And I didn't draw through. Remember, I'm supposed to draw through. I didn't draw it through to make sure I get the right location of that leg. I feel like that might be part of the problem too. I'm gonna just try, like, this is a really nice thing we can do in digital. Easily just shift this thing around. Just kind of, oops, Control T. Closer, better. Yeah, closer is way better. Erase that. Okay, and I think with the tweaks I made to this leg, I want to do something similar on the other leg. It's too straight up, straight down. And go like this. Do something similar. Just turn the feet out more. I think that will make a bit of a difference here. And wherever I can, I'm using like wrinkles and things like that as an opportunity to suggest the thrust of the form, right? What overlaps what, so it doesn't read as too flat. Get a little bit of a form description here as well, right? So by having this go like this, and then having a bit of a compression fold here, I have to be mindful that this works well in context. It's very easy to get carried away and like kind of make a nice detail, but that detail does not work kind of in the bigger picture. So I am catching myself. I'm starting to noodle a little bit here, so I'm going to move forward. If for whatever reason later on I kind of come with a better idea for that, I'll loop back. And for me, this is something I have to catch myself with because just like on tests, I was that guy who, on a test or an exam, like instead of like pacing myself and making sure that I had enough time for each each question, I you know, if I got stuck on one question, I'm like working it out. I'm sitting down there and I'll figure it out, but then, you know, it took too long figuring it out, and I didn't get to some other stuff that that I also knew how to figure out. So it's just kind of like try to, you know, have that self-awareness. Are you maybe kind of going down a rabbit hole, spending too much time on one thing, and is it worth it in the grand scheme of things? Or do you need to kind of just move forward? And what I'm going to do, and I almost forgot, notice how with the bench, I didn't, when I did the bench, I didn't make the lines nice and even. I kind of went wonky. I should absolutely do the same thing for the lines on the leg, right? If I keep these even, it's not as visually kind of like appealing, right? So better if I kind of find ways to break it up. Have some close together, some further apart. You know, play with the angle, right? So they're not all tilted the same way. Okay, maybe there's some feathers here at the top. Nah, that's weird. So I'm just gonna go with the regular chicken leg. So yeah, I think that's my design. I'm happy with it. I'll probably suggest a little bit of form here, just with like some hatching. Hatching is a way to kind of use line to suggest light and shadow. Some of these lines that I have here are actually breaking the illusion of form. So I need to actually go back and fix them. All right. Cool. All right, so I'm pretty okay with this at this point. And so now what I would do is flat this out. Okay, what does that mean? And we've done it before in Photoshop, but we'll just do it today now in Krita. We go onto another layer below it, like so, and we just fill it in with a flat color. Okay, so it's a little imprecise here. You guys will take your time with this. If you don't feel like you have a steady enough hand, you can use the pen tool, or you can use the point-to-point polyline tool, or the poly lasso tool, I should say. And all I'm really trying to get here is the silhouette, just the shape, so that I can work with like a non-destructive painting on different layers. Again, shift to add to your lasso selection, alt to subtract from it. Okay, so let's get a nice mid-range color. Okay, and I'll just fill it in. Okay, I can bring my background back. Okay, we can start to see how this scene will come together. We'll do something similar for our background here. We'll just get a flat color. Let's call this character flat. Go for a background color, background layer. I'll just use a box marquee selection here. We'll just choose a base value that's maybe lighter or darker, probably darker than our bird character. Okay, and this will be our BG flat. Yeah, BG flat. Okay, and on a layer above that, we can basically kind of go in and paint in more unique kind of details. We could say this path, for example, needs to be a little lighter. So I can lasso select that as well. It won't be too precise because I'm just working quickly. What you would do is you would use what you call it, a clipping mask layer setup, like we've looked at in Photoshop. It's possible to do something similar here in Krita. I can't remember exactly how to do it, but that's kind of what I would do here. So that's my path. I'll make a new layer. We'll do the trees. Trees will be dark. And notice how I'm just doing values here. I'm not worried about colors yet. Let's get this nice and dark. Okay. We want to get our other trees to be similarly dark. Zoom in. If you feel like you need a steadier hand, zoom in. Once you zoom in really close, like those lines look like kind of like highways in terms of their width. It's harder to go out of the lines. So when I say go really close, I mean go even closer than I am, like zoom in even tighter. Don't feel like you have to do everything from way zoomed out. Zoom in to the appropriate level that you need for the detail that you want to put in. Zoom out to kind of assess whether or not it works within the context of the entire picture. And then zoom back in to kind of make any further adjustment and whatnot. Okay. A lot of these are going to be trees in the background, so I'll just kind of get some of these. That bench I'll have to do as well at some point. Okay. And so you can see how this will gradually start kind of taking shape, coming together. And we don't have to have a crazy kind of value design or anything like that, but for this here, we can make this even a similar color to the trees.